My name is Michael Reynolds. I'm 34 years old, and I used to be a sergeant in the United States Army. People always assume my scar came from the war, like it's some kind of badge of honor or horror, but it didn't. I got this scar when I was 6, in a fire that killed a dozen children and the only woman who ever loved me unconditionally. Her name was Eleanor. She wasn't just my mother. She was a nurse who worked at the orphanage where I lived. I didn't know she was my mom until much later, but I remember the way she always tucked me in first, the way her hands shook when she saw me fall, the quiet way she smiled when I drew her pictures. She was different from the other staff. She felt at home. The night of the fire, there was chaos everywhere. Smoke, screaming. The heat felt like it was peeling the skin off my bones. I still remember the way her arms wrapped around me, dragging me through a hallway that was already caving in. She pushed me into another woman's hands. I think her name was Carla. I never saw Eleanor again. They told me later she didn't make it. I don't remember pain when the wood splintered across my face. I just remember her eyes. She looked back once, right before the door closed behind me. I think she knew. I think she chose to go back in for the others. The scar didn't come from the war. It came from love. After that, I bounced between hospitals and caseworkers. Eventually, the Petersons took me in. From the outside, they looked like the American dream. 2 cars, a nice lawn, 3 kids, and then me. I was the charity case with bandages on my face and no family name to speak of. They smiled for the cameras and church friends. But in the quiet corners of the house, I knew I didn't belong. They never hit me, never shouted, but silence can bruise deeper than fists. I heard it in the way dinner got quieter when I walked in the separate holiday gifts labeled, from Community Fund, and in the way Derek, their oldest, called me the scar boy when no one was listening. I learned early not to ask for hugs. The scar healed, at least on the outside. But by the time I turned 18, I had already learned that being alive didn't mean being wanted. I enlisted the week I graduated from high school, not because I believed in anything yet, but because the Army didn't care about scars. They just wanted bodies that moved and followed orders. I could do that. I was good at disappearing. What most people don't understand is that war didn't break me. It gave me rules, structure, and a bed that was mine. But that fire, that night, that face in the flames, that was the moment I stopped being a child. That was the moment I started carrying ghosts. The world looks at me and sees a soldier with wounds. But the deepest one was already there long before I ever wore a uniform. The Petersons didn't rescue me, they collected me, like another civic badge to pin on their perfect suburban life. After the fire, after the hospital, they showed up at the group home with polished shoes and practiced smiles, saying things like, "We've always wanted to help a child in need." I was that child. Not because they saw me, but because they saw a story. At first, I tried to be grateful. They gave me a room, a bed, and clothes with tags still on them. It was more than I'd had, but it didn't take long to realize I wasn't one of them. I was more like a guest. 1. They didn't expect to stay too long. They introduced me at church as our foster kid, then quickly added that they were planning to adopt, as if the word foster left a bad taste. Dinner was always quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like noise. I learned to chew soft food, to keep my sleeves down, to say thank you even when I didn't feel it. Derek, their oldest, didn't hide how he felt. He made it a game. Scarface, Burnout, Patch Boy. Once, he told me I looked like a broken toy someone left too close to a campfire. I told myself it didn't matter. Those names were just sounds. But over time, they stuck. They sank into the soft parts of me, into the places I still hoped were lovable. The scar made people flinch. So I stopped trying to be touched. I stopped asking for anything. Then came high school. I joined ROTC, not because I had dreams of glory, but because it gave me something to do, something no one could take. The Petersons started showing up to events, taking pictures, and posting about how proud they were. Proud of me, the future soldier. Not Michael, just the uniform. The day I enlisted, Mr. Peterson shook my hand like I was a business partner. He didn't hug me, he didn't cry. He just nodded and said, "You'll make us proud out there." I didn't know where there was yet, but I knew I wasn't wanted here. They sent care packages when I was deployed. Cookies, socks, little flags. Always addressed to Sergeant Reynolds, never just Michael. The Army didn't care about my face, they cared about my aim, my timing, my loyalty, and I gave them all of it. Then I came home. Not with medals, not with a parade, but with a second scar, one that stretched from temple to chin. Shrapnel, friendly fire, bad luck. It doesn't matter. It made people look away, including the Petersons. The first time they saw me at the airport, I noticed Mrs. Peterson recoil, just a flicker, a half step back. She caught herself, but I caught it too. Derek wouldn't even make eye contact. When we got home, the welcome sign was already faded. Dinner was reheated. No photos this time. It got worse. The silence turned heavy, like smoke you couldn't escape. Mrs. Peterson started skipping my name when she handed out mail. Derek made sure to only speak in the past tense when referring to me around his friends. I became the burden, the expense, the reminder. One night, I overheard her talking to a neighbor on the phone. She said, "We tried, but some kids are just too damaged. They need more than we can give." I was standing 2 rooms away, my hand on the doorframe, breathing through my teeth. I didn't feel anger. Not then. I felt an absence. I stayed for a few more months, mostly because I had nowhere else to go. The VA was slow with benefits. The job market didn't want broken vets with gaps in their resumes and scars on their faces. And I didn't want to reach out to anyone. I didn't want another pity look, another awkward pause, another half-hearted sorry. Eventually, Mrs. Peterson asked if I could help cover the grocery bill since you're getting disability now. That was the last thread. The final reminder that I wasn't her son. I was a wallet with a uniform. I packed my things. Quietly. No goodbyes. No thank yous. Just a folded note on the counter that said I'll figure it out. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew I couldn't do it there. Not in that house full of smiles and spaces where I was never really seen. Layla moved into the house next door the summer after I turned 17. She was different from the start. Not because of how she looked or talked, but because she didn't stare. Everyone else always found a reason to look at the scar, then pretended they didn't. Layla just looked at me. She was studying psychology. Said she wanted to help people who didn't know how to help themselves. I told her that sounded like a nice way of saying broken people. She didn't laugh. She just nodded and said, "Sometimes broken people are the ones who understand healing the best." We started talking on the porch. Quiet evenings after dinner when the neighborhood settled down. She asked questions no one else did. Not about the war or the fire, but about books I liked, music I listened to, dreams I didn't think I had anymore. She asked once what scared me the most. I said, being remembered only by my scars. She never pitied me. That was the part that mattered. She didn't try to fix me or cheer me up. She just listened. And sometimes, when I couldn't speak, she just sat there beside me if silence was allowed. It was the first time I felt seen without being examined. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. There was something sacred about the space we shared. The understanding, the stillness. She became my anchor in a world that constantly made me feel like I was drifting. Then she told me she had to leave. Grad school on the East Coast. Full scholarship. She looked torn about it. I told her to go. Told her I'd be fine. I wasn't. But I knew better than to ask anyone to stay for me. The morning she left, I waited by the window. I thought maybe she'd knock, maybe she'd say goodbye one more time. But she didn't come. I watched the moving truck drive off and felt something close inside me. I never heard from her again. It took me years to find out the truth. She had left a letter. A handwritten one, full of warmth and gratitude and hope. She'd slipped it into the mailbox at the Petersons before leaving town. Said she knew I didn't believe in much, but she believed in me. Told me I made her feel safe, too. I never saw that letter. Mrs. Peterson found it and never passed it on. Maybe she thought it was better that way. Maybe she just didn't want me to have anything good. Either way, the silence that followed felt like another kind of scar. I convinced myself that Layla had just moved on, that I was forgettable, replaceable. That's when I really started cutting off the world. No calls, no visits. I stayed in barracks or motel rooms or parked lots. I told myself it was easier to be alone than to be abandoned. She was the only person who ever saw the boy behind the scars, and I let her disappear. Or at least I thought I did. The wind was sharp that morning, cold enough to cut through the seams of my jacket, but I barely felt it. I stood at the edge of that cliff for almost an hour, just watching the ocean crash into the rocks below. It looked peaceful in a violent sort of way, like maybe it understood what I was feeling. I didn't leave a note. I figured there wasn't much to say. I didn't have anyone left to explain it to anyway. The war was behind me, but it never really let go. Every sound still made me flinch. Every shadow looked like something I forgot how to fight. And every time I looked in the mirror, all I saw was the reason people left. That scar told a story I didn't want to hear anymore. One about loss, about fire, about being too broken to fix. I wasn't angry, not really, I was just tired. Tired of feeling like a burden, like a mistake that kept surviving. I closed my eyes and leaned forward just enough to feel the wind push back. That's when I heard footsteps. Slow, steady, deliberate. I turned, half expecting a ranger or maybe a hiker. But what I saw stopped me cold. He was older, late 60s, maybe early 70s. Military haircut, pressed coat, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He didn't say anything at first. Just looked at me the way a man looks at something he's not sure he has the right to touch. Then he spoke. The words didn't make sense at first. He said, "The military didn't give you that scar. I did." Just like that. Calm, direct, no drama. My brain scrambled to catch up. What the hell did that mean? He reached into his coat and pulled out a card. Slid it into my hand before I could stop him. His name was printed in bold, General Thomas Reed. Then he turned and walked away, no explanation. No questions. I stood there frozen, my hand clenched around that card. My mind is spinning in circles. I wanted to chase after him, to demand answers, but my legs wouldn't move. The cliff didn't matter anymore. I wasn't thinking about falling. I was thinking about that sentence. The military didn't give you that scar. I did. That was the moment everything shifted. I didn't know who he was or what he meant. But for the first time in years, I felt something stronger than pain. I felt curiosity, and that was enough to take a step back from the edge. His office smelled like old leather and secrets. Everything was polished. The floor, the bookshelves, even the medals on the wall. But the man sitting behind the desk looked worn. Not physically, emotionally, like he'd been carrying something heavy for far too long. He asked if I remembered the fire. I nodded. Of course I did. He said he did too. Then he told me her name, Eleanor. I didn't know how he knew that. My throat tightened before I could even ask. He said she was the only woman he ever loved. That she was strong, smarter than anyone in the room, and brave in ways most men never understood. She had told him about me, but by the time he was ready to come back from his deployment, it was too late. He paused before saying the next part. Said he still dreams about the fire, about the news reports that followed. The headlines all said the same thing. No survivors. Not a single child made it out. That's what he believed for over 30 years. But Eleanor had made a different choice. She knew the fire was coming. Maybe not the flames themselves, but something. He said she handed me over to one of the nurses, Carla. Told her to run, that I was the only thing that mattered. She didn't make it out. He never saw her again. And the scar on my face? That was from debris, wood or glass. No one ever said for sure, but it came from that night, from that building. For a moment, he had no power to stop. He leaned forward and said something I still hear in my sleep. I should have been there. If I had known, if I hadn't listened to orders, maybe none of it would have happened. Then he looked at me and added, "The military didn't give you that scar. I did." There was no anger in his voice, just grief, like a man trying to make peace with a war he never understood. That's when I knew. He wasn't just a soldier, he was my father. The ballroom was filled with uniforms, champagne flutes, and polished shoes. Flags lined the walls, and a brass quartet played softly in the background. I stood near the edge, uncomfortable in a borrowed suit, wondering why I even showed up. The Petersons were there too. Mrs. Peterson had that same tight smile she wore in church. Derek looked older, but the sneer hadn't aged a day. He spotted me across the room, walked over with that same smug tilt of his head, and said something loud enough for people to hear. "Guess they'll let anyone in now, even burnouts with charity medals." I didn't respond. Not yet. I didn't need to. Because just then, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage, and General Reed walked out, medals on his chest, posture sharp as steel. The room quieted the moment he took the mic. He spoke about sacrifice, about men who served without recognition. Then he said, "There's someone here tonight whose story you don't know, a man you've all overlooked, a man who carries not just the scars of battle, but of abandonment." My chest tightened, I felt eyes turning, and then he said it. "That man is my son. His name is Michael Reynolds, and I'm proud to finally call him mine." Gasps. A murmur swept the room. I saw Mrs. Peterson's face twist like she'd just swallowed poison. Derek's mouth hung open. I didn't move, couldn't. My legs felt cemented to the floor. Then the applause started. Slow, hesitant at first, then rising, louder, stronger. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't someone's burden or secret. I was someone's son, someone worth standing up for. It was the first time I felt like I existed in full view, not as a mistake, but as a man who finally had a name worth saying out loud. I never wanted the spotlight, not the media buzz after the gala, not the inheritance Reed offered. I thanked him, told him I'd accept the name, but not the lifestyle. What I needed wasn't more money. It was a purpose. So I bought an old building near the edge of town, renovated it with my own hands, named it the Eleanor Haven, a place for kids without families, veterans without homes, people carrying scars no one else could see, just like I did for most of my life. We filled the walls with light, warm meals, clean beds, and voices that knew how to listen. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave it somewhere to go, somewhere to become something better. I was locking up one evening when I saw her standing at the gate. Same eyes, same stillness. Layla. She held a small envelope in her hand and didn't say a word until we sat on the steps together. She told me she'd seen the video. The gala speech had gone viral. She watched it 3 times before booking a ticket. Then she reached into her coat and handed me the letter. The one she left all those years ago. I held it for a long time before I opened it. Her words were soft, honest. She had never meant to disappear. She thought I'd chosen silence. I thought she had. Turned out, someone else made that choice for both of us. We sat there, quiet, like we used to. No need to fill the air, just the sound of things settling. I told her about the Haven. She told me she was proud. I didn't cry, not then. But something inside me finally let go. That night, for the first time, I didn't dream about fire or war. I dreamed about open doors, about laughter down hallways, about a little boy with a scar, standing beside a woman who saw him for everything he was. Not broken, just becoming.